Call to order the March 16th, 2020 City Council meeting. All councilors are present with the exception of Moore and Grindle. I understand that Councilor Moore is on his way. So with that, we'll pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3, rules of order. We follow Robert's rules of order, and tonight we're going to create a new rule. The councilors in the front table will need to turn when you want to be recognized, so I can see you. Not really. So, and also the rules that we adopted at our annual meeting. I would like to just, before we jump into the agenda, just note that for the public, we have set up the room a little bit differently to take into account the recommendations in terms of social distancing, and we have created that for the councilors as well as the public. We had a room upstairs. Had we had more individuals, we would have had an overflow room upstairs for tonight. We contemplated canceling the meeting, but there are a few items that we needed to do business, so we decided to go forward with this meeting. And from this point forward, we will certainly make decisions for next month of whether or not there'll be a council meeting based on where we sit as a community at that time. So tonight's agenda also will be looking at trying to move through it as quickly as possible, perhaps tabling some items so that the public can participate more in some of those items. So with that said, I'll move on to the adoption of the Ellsworth City Council minutes from February.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
You have a motion?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion approved. Andrew Cole.
Not a lot to report since yesterday, other than our staff has done an incredible job in 72 hours, where, as you all know, things have escalated very quickly, and we are now in a situation where we're serving the public, and I think we're doing it pretty well under the circumstances, and people have been very good about it, but without access into City Hall. And I've watched our folks and dealing with the public and the public's reaction, and we will get through this, we will. Yesterday there was a question about trash pickup, and we did call Pine Tree, and business as usual in terms of pickups. So I did want to pass that along. And that's all I have tonight, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And just let's say thank you for your team to pull everything together on short notice to get the city hall in a position to to manage the situation. I know a lot of work went into it this morning.
It feels like Sunday was an eternity ago, and it was just yesterday.
Committee reports. Any councilors attend any committees that they would like to report out on?
Yeah, I have one. The Recreation Committee met. Budget presentations were made by the YMCA, the Ellsworth Concert Band, the Grand, the Community Music Institute, and Ellsworth Under the Stars. Those recommendations were forwarded to Tammy Moat, and they'll be presented to us at a later date. The ice rink update is the ice rink is done for the year. There were changes to the recreation ordinance, and they were approved. And there are 2 new student members with voting rights on the committee, Lillian Frank and Benton Bird. I believe we're voting on that tonight, or no? And subcommittees are being formed for the parade and the dog park, and the next meeting's April 1st. That's it.
Thank you. Other committees? All right, seeing none. Now we're going to move into item 7, citizens' comments, and this is where I would like to start by first welcoming and thanking members of the Northern Light Maine Coast Memorial Hospital After yesterday, one of the questions from the community was just to seek some guidance and advice and wisdom from all of you, and we appreciate you being able to be here tonight. So we'll start by turning the podium over to you. And
Hi, I'm Kristen Sear. I'm the Vice President of Nursing at Maine Coast and Blue Hill Hospital. So got to chime in on a little bit of the meeting yesterday. Unfortunately, it's partway through online, so sorry we're not here in person to address the questions, but we feel very prepared. I will say that. We have a lot going on. We're meeting daily, sometimes multiple times a day. I think one of the large questions were about our supplies. That's everyone's question nationwide. Right now, we're sitting in a good spot as far as our volume, what we have for supplies, and what we anticipate needing. Of course, we're still conserving supplies and following the CDC guidelines for that because we don't know what the future is going to hold, right? We're week by week, day by day. So we are taking conservative measures for using our PPE sparingly. And also that helps us as a whole system and as a whole country. If we were to, be haphazard with the way we use our PPE supplies, then we're putting everybody at risk at that point. So I think we're doing a good job with our planning. I'll just touch on a couple of things that came up on the meeting yesterday, and let me know if you want me to touch on anything else. Tent. A tent did get assembled at both Maine Coast and Blue Hill hospitals. Not quite sure what we're going to do with it. We were acting with caution, knowing that down the road the tents may not be available. The goal right now is to use them when we need to for decompression or for, there's some states that are using drive-by swabbing concepts. We're not quite there yet, but we have some friends at Mercy Hospital that have trialed it and went live, I believe, this morning with it. So we'll take some lead from their example, and we'll see how we need to utilize the tents, but we have secured them knowing that resources and other tent availability will be limited. So let's see. We're doing all the right things, social distancing, trying to educate folks on social distancing, being the 6 feet away.
How are we doing?
You're doing good tonight. That's really good. Also, washing your hands. People forget Purell might not be available. I think Bed Bath & Beyond or Bath & Body Works is out of hand sanitizer, but soap works great. It's been around. It does a good job. So make sure we're educating people to wash their hands, social distancing. As hard as it is, try not to touch your face, cough into your elbow, all the standard things that we would do during flu and RSV season. So let's see. Any other hot topics that we missed that we should discuss? Yeah.
How many ventilators do you have, and do you have any extras on hand?
Sure. That is a changing number, right? We keep a certain amount in-house at both hospitals, and then we work with Northern Light for our supply chain, which we're on, I want to say daily calls, but it's probably every other day at this point in time, moving the resources around as they're needed. Some hospitals don't need as many as they have. We have not faced a ventilator issue at this point in time at all. So prepared to up the par level if we need to, but we're not at that point, even close. So, yeah.
How many ICU beds do you have?
9. Yeah, we have 9 ICU beds. That's at Maine Coast, and Blue Hill we have a SKU as well.
so one of the questions I would have, and I think the public raised this as well, is just what do you recommend in terms of when somebody should maybe go to the ED, that process, if they're not feeling well, when's the right time so that your system isn't overloaded, so that we know the protocols that we should follow in terms of whether it's calling ahead or not?
Sure.
What do you have in place?
Sure. Right now, still our protocols are in place that the more heads up we have, if a patient knows that they're seeking care at a certain location, whether it be the emergency department, whether it be calling EMS, whether it's calling on a primary care provider, the more heads up we have, the better we're prepared for that visit. We may screen outside of a practice area. If you show up at, let's say, the walk-in availability slots, you show up there, we will very likely come out and screen you for your risk before coming into the building. That's a common trend that's going on. So right now, the more heads up we get, the better, but we're an emergency department at both facilities, and we're capable of handling you if you show up at the door. We're certainly there to take care of you.
Mr. Chair. Question from a resident earlier today. Has the hospital identified any areas away from the grounds for pre-screening for the virus? And have they identified any sites, any additional sites off-site for beds if needed?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Hospitals always have an ongoing emergency preparedness plan that talks about alternate care sites. Right now, in this situation, we're certainly, again, not there yet. We're not at capacity. We're not reaching capacity at this time. So, yes, we do have backup plans in place. As far as screening off-site, I would say our telephone means of screening right now, that's considered off-site. Patients are calling, we're screening over the phone, we're guiding them over the phone. And telling them, you know, as much as we can over the phone, what site location to go to. So
if in a week's time, for instance, if all this goes to hell in a handbasket, right now you have the site for additional beds, but not for additional pre-screening, correct?
Well, I think when we talk pre-screening, right, that's what our tent concepts can be used for. There's multiple ways that we can pre-screen. We can set up an alternate site location. As most of you, if you followed the CMS waivers, right, the 1135s, those have gone on record saying thus far we have a waiver to put inpatients in other areas of our hospital that aren't typically used for inpatient as long as they're suitable. So I think we have some flexibility given the national disaster level that, you know, we can take care of the patients at alternate sites or other areas of the hospital.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I actually work at another hospital, and we found it helpful is your primary care office screening those calls, or are they going straight to the ER? And if they are going to the ER, we found it helpful to refer the ER calls back to one provider who's doing the screening, and then instructing them to come, call from the parking lot, and we'll come out and test.
Yep.
And
So
it's really sped up the process, especially with the paperwork.
yeah, so we are screening at the practice location. I think that's going well. I'm looking at Dr. Whitaker, who can confirm over at Resort Way. That is going well. You'll see other Northern Light facilities are going to start looking at a central call concept. That keeps that flow, like you were saying, moving at a faster pace. But right now we can handle the volume that we have in the calls that are coming in.
Excellent.
And I'll just tell you, we're here to partner with the community as far as the hospital goes. I can't even count now how many other organizations outside of Northern Light or businesses that have called that just don't have the manpower. We're happy to share documents, our signage. We're all in it together. So if someone has a need, reach out. We're happy to provide what we can to save someone doing the duplicate work. So
Thank you.
yeah.
And my face has never been itchier since we can't touch our hands.
I know. Can you see my nose? I'm like trying not to touch the nose. Anything else I can answer?
Thank you.
Oh, all right.
All right. So also, in terms of this portion of the agenda, I'd like to ask Dan Higgins, Superintendent of Schools, to come up. Yesterday, he and his leadership of the school, the administrators, had been meeting to really put together the plan about what led to the decision around closing the schools, and making sure that there was a plan in place for not only the closure but moving forward. And so he offered to be here to give us an update on that decision, that process, and also what we can expect as we move forward.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. If I might, I'd just like to talk a little bit about today in our schools. Spent most of my day in all of our schools today talking with staff, talking with students, thanking our incredible staff for the work that they have done to put plans in place, even though, as you heard previous speakers say, sorry, I have an itchy face too. Previous speakers say the situation is evolving so quickly. Sometimes plans that you make on one day or in the morning are changed in the afternoon. But our staff has done an incredible job. But in my discussions with staff and students today, our staff really were doing a great job to assure our students that they were going to be fine moving forward, to assure them that we were looking forward to having them back, to try to reassure them that if they do all the things that are being recommended, that we've been reinforcing in our schools, that the situation is going to move forward and people are going to get back to normal hopefully as soon as possible. In talking with students, many of them were disappointed to having to go home, but particularly at the older grade levels, many of the kids said, you know, we understand why we have to do this. We don't want to, but we understand it, and we just want to be safe. So we just have to say that in terms of today, the last day that we had for instruction for students, it went extremely well as even better than could be expected. We did have, as we expected, not full enrollment. Many families opted to, of their own volition, to keep their children home today, and we certainly respect and appreciate that. But in closure, with regards to today, excuse me, Mr. Moore. Just want to reassure the citizens of Ellsworth and the council that the staff members that you have working in your schools, working with our children and supporting our children, are the best that you're going to find anywhere. I would put our staff up against any staff anywhere in the state of Maine. So with regard to decision-making that led to the closure, and reiterating the piece where we're talking about things changing very rapidly, as recently as last Wednesday, discussions of superintendents around the county were hopeful that we would be able to complete this entire school week and we might see a closure on March 23rd. That seemed relatively reasonable. And that's only about 2 weeks following information coming from the CDC and the Department of Education that closures were unlikely. From last Wednesday to March 13th and March 14th, that outlook completely turned around. And that was based on new information that was provided to one of our county school systems from the medical and scientific community that was also shared with our school system on Saturday morning. That information that was provided, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, resulted in the decision for Mount Desert Island schools to close effective Monday. And that was shared with other superintendents. In essence, the information was with regard to taking steps possible to close our schools, do the best that we can to flatten the curve of potentially increased cases caused by potential community transmission and confirmed cases, so that we can, number one, help eliminate the spread, but also help ensure that our healthcare resources, and appreciate you folks being here tonight, are not overburdened any more than they already are. We know that our hospitals and healthcare resources are very busy already. We know that there's a shortage of equipment, shortage of ventilators, things that are happening in other countries. Information along those lines led us to strongly consider making sure we moved up our closing decision. But please also know that with that information that really pushed us in the decision to close earlier than we anticipated, we didn't take the decision lightly. We also are balancing that with the undue hardships that a closure would place on our staff, on our students, on our parents, on our community members, daycare providers, medical providers, and the local business community. Those are things that we had to balance into that conversation and that decision-making process. Certainly, closure of the schools is impacting over 1,350 students here in Ellsworth, and so many more parents. That's a lot of planning, a lot of changes, a lot of decisions that have to be made for those families. So we're balancing the information that's out there that supports closing with what is the impact going to be on our communities and all the related impacts that go along with that. With that being said, through our work and our communication with other superintendents, information shared back and forth between school board leadership and the entire school board, we moved forward with the decision that we were going to implement a closure that would, and actually, if I could, I neglected something. If I could go back, our original school schedule, and I apologize for this, our original school schedule called for a workshop day this coming Friday. Part of the decision-making process towards the end of last week was to move that workshop day up to earlier in the week in anticipation that a closure may come. We communicated that to families Friday. Instead of moving it to Monday, we moved it to Tuesday because we wanted to give our families as much time as possible, as much time practically possible, to make arrangements, because that represented a change in their schedules. So with that in mind, when we made the decision to close, our decision was based upon having the school day today for the purposes of giving our students and families an opportunity to pick up their personal belongings, to obtain their medication, to obtain materials that we were prepared to send home in terms of our plans for remote and distance learning, and to have an opportunity to take care of all those pieces. And then to go ahead with our workshop day tomorrow, where our staff members are going to continue with the plans, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute, continue with the plans that we have for distance and remote learning, but also the logistics necessary for us to provide that service and some other services, which I'll also talk about. So that was the ultimate decision that ended up being communicated yesterday afternoon to our community. And again, I appreciate the acknowledgement that we spent a great deal of time over the weekend, like many people have, poring over the information, considering all the variables involved in making this very difficult decision, which is a difficult decision that's going to impact all of us. And once it was made, the decision was made to make that decision, calling our leadership team in for an emergency meeting yesterday, where we could put the pieces in place so that we could provide as accurate as possible information based upon what we know at that time to our families, and to eliminate as many questions as possible so families would know when we're closing, what the procedures are going to be, and what the plans that we know at this point in time. And that's what was communicated. Now, as you all know, last evening, Governor Mills, I believe it was around 7 o'clock, a little bit after 7 o'clock, spoke, and she came forward with the recommendation that we had not had before, that schools in Maine are recommended to cease student instruction as soon as practicable, and left open the determination of how schools would arrange the logistics of having students and families be able to pick up materials or get materials from school. Her recommendation to me confirmed and validated the decision that we made, the plan that we have in place, and to me that was very helpful and reaffirming. And to me, part of that led to the fact that today went as well as it did. So with that being said, there are some other updates from the communication that I shared yesterday in writing. One is educational programming. What we communicated yesterday is that for the remainder of this week, there will be no remote, distance, or academic expectations of our students. Okay? The primary reason for that is, even though our staff members have been moving mountains in making preparations, and our staff members have been working on this for some time, in addition to their regular jobs, to prepare for the eventual or potential closure. We're not at the point now where we were ready to send all of those materials home today. And some of the reasons for that are we wanted to ensure that we were as equitable as possible in providing materials to all of our students. And when I say as equitable as possible, we expected there would be many students who did not attend today. So if we had some materials ready to send home with some students, some students who were not there were not able to get those materials, we viewed that as a potential inequity. We also did not want to convey the message that families who made a decision based upon their own belief to keep their child home could be viewed as being penalized for not being at school today. So we provided materials and sent home materials that are assigned specifically to students, but the work packets and the expectations for the first 2-week period have not been sent home yet. Again, equity is one piece. The other piece is consistency across our schools. Our teachers have been working extremely well and extremely hard to prepare those materials. In some cases, some of our teams are at a certain level in preparation of those materials. Other teams, because they have more variables to deal with, do not have quite the level of readiness. And again, that's not a criticism of them, it's a reality. So what we did not want to do is have certain grade levels or grade spans have students receive information and other grade levels, grade spans not receive information. So equity and consistency were very key components in making that decision. So what that leaves us to do in terms of academic programming, please know that remote learning, many people think of remote learning as being specifically technology-based. One of the other challenges that we're looking at in Ellsworth, the last survey that was done in terms of internet connectivity and access in homes is that we have about 80% of our families who have that. So having remote learning be the primary way that we provide programming to students over the closure. There's a significant equity issue and access issue right there. We need to be able to ensure that we're providing the same opportunities for all students. And if we focus just on the technology piece where 20% of our families do not have access, that's a challenge that we've got to overcome. The other pieces are we have to determine what our distribution plans are going to look like. I know there are some school systems who also did not send home materials. Either they were not fully prepared and ready for the same reasons that I discussed with Ellsworth, or they were closed today. Some systems are planning to have families come to the schools and pick up materials. Okay? That certainly is an option, but when you close schools and remove that student body population, you have to be concerned with, are you going to be bringing a number of people into the schools? But there are some options with regard to pickup. It could be that we do some creative scheduling that will allow parents to come in at certain times, practicing appropriate social distancing that would allow that to happen. Or, weather permitting, have tables outside and schedule times where parents could come and pick things up, again, practicing social distancing. The other piece that we're looking at is actually delivering materials to students. Please understand that the recommendation for ceasing educational instruction in schools does not include with it a prohibition to have staff continue to work as long as we have appropriate social distancing practices in place. And we have a lot of staff, so for example, if we are able to work out a method by which we have some of our transportation providers take the packets that have been prepared by our teachers, the materials prepared by our teachers, running their same bus routes, and have staff that could be from any of our departments go along with them, deliver those packets. Those are some things that we're looking at in terms of ensuring that all of our families get the materials that are necessary. And again, it's a lot of work, there are a lot of logistics, and please understand that we have 1,300 students across our district for whom we have to get the materials to. Along the same lines, one of the things that I'm really pleased to announce in my communication yesterday, I noted that because in Ellsworth, and this has been a long-standing goal of our food service director, is to get to a level of 50% free and reduced lunch eligibility, which provides additional subsidy to help us provide additional programming. We have never been able to get there. We've been between 45 and 48% for a number of years, and Mrs. Thomas, that's been that case for a few years, has it not? So as a result of that eligibility level, we were not eligible for summer service, food service programming, which also meant that during a closure, we would not be eligible for subsidy to support provision of meals to students who needed it. That has changed with the governor's announcement last evening. The state government has received a waiver of the federal rules that in essence makes us eligible for that subsidy, which is outstanding news. So along with that, we're waiting for the guidance on what we need to do to get the formal approval so that we can put the plan in place to prepare meals and to distribute them. Because our understanding is we're not able to provide them on site, again, because we're not going to be bringing all of our students back into the school to feed them. So just an example of what it may look like, and again, this would involve many of our staff who, by the way, are very willing during the closure to be coming in, practicing appropriate social distancing to help out in any way they can to serve our students. I apologize. It may be a case where we have the meals prepared in secure packages, and through working with our parents and families who place the orders, using our transportation department, other employees to transport those meals by our bus routes, deliver them to homes where we'll have an arrangement with families. There may be a cooler that they leave on the front porch, or be able to hang it on a doorknob or something of that nature. But it'll be an opportunity where we can look at options like that to ensure that we can provide meal service to the students who are eligible for it and need it. So to me, that's a positive development that just happened overnight last night. The other thing that I would also like to mention, and I think we saw this back in the ice storm in 1998, it's amazing the number of people who have reached out and said, what can we do, especially when they learned about our lack of eligibility at the time, what can we do to support ways to help provide food to our students? My wife on social media has had over a dozen people reach out to her and say, let us know what we can do to help bring materials in. Former school board member Andrea Perry emailed me earlier today making a similar offer about People in Ellsworth are so generous and caring. They care about our kids. If there's a mechanism by which people can donate and give, please let us know what it is, and I'm sure people will help out. Along those same lines, in our schools, food service director and our staff who oversee the food pantries in our schools have been working to find ways to hopefully expand what we can acquire so that we can use food pantries, potentially our backpack program, and expand those pieces to help further support providing food to families and students who are in need. So those are some pieces that we're really working on that need logistical development before we can put them in place. But again, that's a very positive development. So please stay tuned, and if I may, I'm going to use this public forum to say, folks, if there are ways that those of you who can contribute and help, please be prepared to do so, and hopefully information will be going out sooner rather than later to give you a mechanism of how that can happen. Another piece that has changed from our communication that went out yesterday, our decision was to close our schools from 3 o'clock today for instruction for students through April 3rd. The governor's recommendation last evening stated it was to be for an indefinite period. Again, our plan here is to follow the governor's guidance, but as we move forward over the next couple of weeks and continue our plans and continue our work to provide the necessary services to our students, we're going to continue to monitor the information as it evolves, and as we all know, it's evolving very rapidly, and get to a point where hopefully we're discussing when we can bring our students back to school. But depending upon the information that's available in the next couple of weeks and additional guidance that we get from the department, state government, we may be discussing what it may look like for closure to be extended. And hopefully that's not the case. But I also want to reiterate, once again, please know, folks, everyone out there, members of the council, members who are here tonight, this was not a decision that was taken lightly and without recognizing the significant impact that's taking place in our community. But again, as I refer back to the ice storm, and I saw today in our schools with our staff, in the most difficult of times, people come together, people unite, people do what is necessary to take care of each other and do what's in the best interest of our communities. And I'm confident that that is going to be what we see over the next several weeks.
So just to make your job a little bit easier, don't rush on getting the packet to my son. He's not going to do it until the day before you reopen. So.
I will make note of that,
listening.
but I'm just trying to think if we get a number of those requests, the logistics of our delivery system, if that's what it ends up being, are going to be much more difficult.
So, the other comment that I would make, and I really want to extend this, I know that there unfortunately we're in that evolving situation where what is suggested as the course of action has changed quickly. In a matter of hours, it changes, and conflicting messages. The fact of the matter is that the decision in I think most places now, and we saw the governor last night, in terms of closing down schools to flatten that curve, prevent the spread of the virus, that was a decision. And one thing I would really want to commend is, beyond the schools, the consistency in the community, and I want to address this to Peter and the why, the decision to support that in terms of not just moving kids from one setting. If the plan is to prevent kids from congregating in large groups, and that's the decision that we make as a community, that consistency is really important, otherwise we defeat the purpose, and especially with all the hardships that go with closing the schools. So I just want to recognize that for this community to do that, and I know that was not an easy decision for you and your organization, but it's consistent. And if anything we need during this situation is consistency. It's not happening everywhere. There's a lot of inconsistency. So I just wanted to commend that partnership and working together to arrive at a message that the public can understand, and that transparency going forward of just being able to hear what is happening in this community is so helpful for everybody, because they can understand it and know what's going on. Even though it does create a lot of inconvenience, the fact of the matter, it's the decision that people feel will keep people safe during this time.
Is it possible if I could add on to that a little bit? I agree with everything that you just said in terms of our community. But I think it's also important to recognize, you know, with regard to this closure decision, there has been, for the past several weeks, significant conversations amongst the superintendents in Hancock County, because one of the things that we have tried to do is be as consistent as possible, recognizing that, number one, in our schools in Ellsworth, we have students that come from a number of different communities that are, some of them are in other school systems. But the consistency as possible is very important, and that communication continued. But I think it also extends to the fact that communities coming together and supporting each other. Prior to the knowledge that we were going to become eligible for subsidy for food service programming, RSU 25 in Bucksport, and I'm happy to name them, but again, I know that had it been any other system in Hancock County, they would have done the same thing. We had learned in the webinar with the Commissioner of Education on Saturday that districts that didn't meet the eligibility standards may be able to piggyback with districts that did. In my conversations with Superintendent Boothby and their food service director, they said whatever we can do to provide you an opportunity to access the program through us and support your kids, we will be happy to do. And I can just say that what's going on in this community in uniting and coming together, it also extends to Hancock County. And to me that's really a gratifying thing, and I think it's a show that people are all in this together.
Thank you.
I just wanted to speak to the idea that we're decreasing public gatherings, and so we have elected as Northern Light to decrease, if not stop, all elective surgeries and a lot of the wellness visits and other visits that aren't medically necessary. So people will be hearing about that in the community. I just want you aware of that.
Thank you.
With the backpack programs, that is just for the students that get free or reduced lunch.
Well,
it's not for the students that kind of either bring their
backpack
own or...
The backpack program is a smaller scale program, and the families who've been receiving that are families identified through our staff at the school as meeting a high level of need. Our idea is whether that program can be expanded upon, because we partner with another organization here in town with that. It's not necessarily whether that can be expanded, although there is some openness with that organization to partner with us on a larger effort. It's also to maybe expand upon the food pantries that we have at EEMS and EHS that may provide us enough foods that we can incorporate that into delivery of foods through the state program.
And what about spoilage? What kind of food would be delivered that could sit for hours?
The foods that have been distributed through that program are collected with that in mind. And again, they're intended to last, the backpack program, over a weekend. What we're looking at now is kind of looking at it in some cases in 2-week increments, because the way we're planning our academic piece is 2-week increments. It stands to reason that if we can look at the food service piece outside of the National School Lunch Program in providing those pieces, it's things that have a shelf life of at least 2 weeks, that meet certain nutritional standards. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. But absolutely, it's got to be things that are going to last.
And are these things that if parents, let's say parents work in healthcare and they can't not work, where healthcare workers are needed, are these things that a student, if they were 12, 13, 14 years old, could easily prepare on their own?
I think I'm going to have to get a little more information on that. The goal is to provide food so that kids will have it in the home, but it also supports the families. So I don't know that it's necessarily designed for students of that age to prepare it on their own, but that's certainly something that we can incorporate into our conversation. I would also add, folks, that when we're talking about the donations of food and how we can distribute it, we also have to look at the social distancing pieces for how we receive those foods. You know, who's going to bring it in? Who's going to be there to receive it? We need to make sure that we have all the proper precautions in place. But again, with the generosity of our community, I really think that that's going to be less of a challenge to overcome. We're going to find that we probably have more than we can imagine to support our kids.
Councilor Miller.
Thank you for being here and communicating the information to us. Information, communication, and transparency is the key to calming fears, I think. This was a big decision to close the schools. Before you made the decision, was there a meeting and a school board vote to do this or no?
No, there was not a school board vote. Statutory responsibility for canceling and closing schools rests with the superintendent. However, When you look at the policies and procedures and practices that are in place for the school board, I maintained communication with the school board electronically. Also, one of the policies that we have in between meetings, scheduled meetings of the board, with the board chair, is the opportunity for the superintendent and board chair to confer on crucial issues, of which this obviously meets that standard. In Ellsworth, that practice has typically included the vice chair. And also, when you're looking at the quickness with which the information was being presented and changing, the need to make decisions needed to be done very quickly. While ultimately is my decision, I exercised the policy language that allowed me to confer with the chair and vice chair and shared the information that I had and what recommendations that I had with them, not from a voting perspective, but to get input to support my decision. With those conferrals, there was communication with the entire board electronically. So with regard to communication, the communication was there. But again, ultimately, the final decision was mine. But even though it was not a board vote or a board leadership vote, I did rely on the information to support my decision.
Councilor Singh, any further questions? Thank you for presenting. Appreciate it.
That's it. Thank you very much. And again, folks, thank you very much for your patience, understanding, support of the schools. And as information evolves, we will be sure to communicate it for our families through our Infinite Campus notification system, but also through our website and our Facebook page.
I think this.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I walked in late, and thank you for being here. I just
Could you come up to the microphone, please? Because the people, this is being broadcast, so.
Is that fine? Okay.
thank you for being here.
This is not personal, this is social.
Thank you for being here, and I'm sorry I was late. I just wanted to ask you a question. Wasn't one of the reasons why the school was going to stay open, or they were trying to stay open, was because the kids, you know, had to be at school because the parents are working, and what are they doing? You know, now, you know, they might be out of their job or whatever, and who's going to take care of the kids? So I know that you mentioned Governor Mills, but I mean, were you able to translate that to her about what the average person is going to be doing that cannot afford to lose their job and have to take care of their kids, and they can't afford daycare?
So, just in terms of just our time and process, I think that there'll be some other opportunities, but if you could just really quickly summarize that, and
I'll
I just don't want
respond to that in the best way that I can. I appreciate the question. I certainly have not communicated directly with Governor Mills, and I know you were not insinuating that, but obviously that was a consideration that went into the ultimate decision to make the closure of our schools, because certainly that's going to be an impact. Now, I do understand, and again, at the state level, my understanding is that there has been recent action to extend unemployment benefits so that in the case that people either can't work or are laid off, may be able to qualify for those benefits easier than they would under the regular rules. My understanding is also that with the declaration of the national emergency, and I believe it's $50 billion that's going to be distributed federally to the states. And again, the timing of that flow and how those funds are used. My hope, and I know I've shared this with our local legislators, is that that's how those funds could be used, because certainly it is a hardship. The decision to close schools is a hardship, and there are going to be people who can't work. In fact, I can tell you, yesterday afternoon, after we provided the announcement that we were closing schools, and I'm being cognizant of the time, a parent in one of our local establishments was waiting on me. She says, "Oh, I heard that schools were closed. I haven't seen the message yet. Is that true?" I said, "Well, it is true, but we're going to be in session tomorrow for these reasons." And before I had a chance to finish the sentence, she turned and went to her supervisor and said, "I will be here tomorrow. My child's going to school." So to me, that just exemplifies the fact that we've got a lot of parents who are going to be in very difficult situations. So hopefully, through the legislative action at the state level and the federal level, some of those funds are going to flow to support those people. It is my hope. The other thing, and again, I'm encouraged by this, I think back to the ice storm. Neighbor helping neighbor was so common back then. I'm certainly in hopes that that is going to happen here. Now, again, this is also complicated because you've got social distancing, the fact of maintaining those types of things may make it a challenge to do the neighbor helping neighbor thing. So I don't know if I've answered your question completely, but
All right, thank you. Any other citizen comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to presentation of awards. I am nothing personal, but I will not be shaking hands. But I do want to present to David Cole for 5 years with the City of Ellsworth. The City of Ellsworth proudly presents the Certificate of Service to David Cole in recognition of your 5 years of service as City Manager for the City of Ellsworth. Your devotion to duty and loyalty to the community have contributed to the improvement of the City of Ellsworth, presented this 16th day of March, 2020. And you did sign it, so that's
Good job.
I'll just mention Darrell Clark, who couldn't be here, will present this at another time for 20 years of service with the Ellsworth Fire Department. Proclamation. Do we have the proclamation?
I think it's at the end of the agenda.
Yeah, it's the last item.
Oh,
It's the last item.
Okay, so we'll come back to it. Moving on to unfinished business. Council order number 121905, request of the fire chief to purchase a fire engine and loose equipment through the Houston-Galveston Area Council Cooperative Purchasing Program, with the dealer vendor being Greenwood Emergency Vehicles. This is an item that was tabled at the December 16, 2019 regular council meeting for 90 days. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, move to table it until the April council meeting.
Second.
A motion and second. All in favor to table this item? I would ask Chief Tepperlow to step forward just for, understand there's a bit of confusion for the public, so we wanted to get this clarified clearly.
Sure. So when this was tabled before, we were asked to look at several different options.
Okay, not this item, but the other issue.
Oh, I'm sorry,
We're gonna
thank
table, this item's being tabled for a
Perfect.
future meeting, but I wanted you to address the other issue that you told me about.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So it has come to my attention recently that there's been some confusion, people thinking that we are not responding to emergency calls for the fire department. And I rest assured that we are responding to any and all calls that come into our department, so we can null and void that thought process. We obviously, as we discussed on Sunday, are taking a few different precautions based on what's happening in the world today, but we will be responding to any and all calls.
Thank you. And also a little bit out of the usual, because of the way the situation we're in, a couple of comments coming through. We have it set up to receive some questions. So I just really wanted to direct this to Manager Cole, a question about, will the city be enacting any ordinances that would force bars or restaurants to close?
No.
Thank you.
That would be any future consideration, but there's nothing pending.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda, all items with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Item 10, Council Order Number 032000, reservation of the City of Ellsworth's right to harvest alewives. Number 11, Council Order Number 032001, request of the city manager to hold a special municipal school budget validation referendum election on June 9th, 2020, for the purpose of validating the school budget in conjunction with the State of Maine primary election. Item 12, Council Order Number 032002, request of the Recreation Commission to appoint Lillian Frank and Benton Bird as Student Recreation Commission members with the City of Ellsworth Recreation Commission, with terms to expire on June 30th, 2021. And item 13, Council Order Number 032003, request of the City Assessor to approve a property tax abatement for the FY 2019 taxes assessed to Judge Strang, DBA Roasted Maine, Munis ID number 8174, in the amount of $452.35 plus interest and fees. Do any councilors want to remove any item? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move approval as presented.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. New business, item 14, public hearing and action on the issuance of business licenses. Siam Sky LLC DBA Siam Sky 2, 78 Down East Highway for a new city Class C license liquor and victualler, and a new state Class 3 and 4 restaurant malt and vinous liquor license. Everything is in order. We did waive and want to get an official approval that we waived their attendance where this is an initial application given the events taking place. And so that's why they are not present. Any councilors have a question? All right, I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Councilor Kaplan?
If they just want to change it to city as opposed to town on the actual application, just to have it, all your i's and t's dotted and crossed.
Comment?
I didn't get any of that.
She said it's listed as town, not city, on the documents.
Oh, okay.
So that should be like that.
Such a whiteout should fix that.
So, public hearing is closed. Councilors?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Atlantic Coast Inn, 200 High Street for renewal of a city lodging house license. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval of Atlantic Coast Inn, Mr. Chairman.
You have a motion? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. The Eagles Lodge Incorporated, 278 High Street for renewal of a city lodging house license. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman, move approval of the request of the Eagles Lodge.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Morse LLC DBA Tag Sports Bar, 248 State Street, Suite 4, for renewal of a city Class A license, amusement, liquor, arcade, and victualler, and renewal of a state Class 11 restaurant, lounge, malt, spiritus, and vinous liquor license. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Motion?
Second.
A second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Asset Management Incorporated, DBA Riverside Cafe, 151 Main Street, for renewal of a city Class C license, victualler and liquor, and renewal of a state restaurant Class 1, 2, 3, 4 malt, spiritus, and vinous liquor license. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Public hearing is closed.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Item 15, Council Order Number 032004, request to approve a one-year extension to the commercial lease agreement with Michael Harris, DBA Harris's Harborside Takeout for a vending concession stand at the Ellsworth Harbor.
I'd like to request a table.
Councilors?
So moved.
Motion to table. All in favor? Do we have a second? Just officially. We have a motion to table. Second.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous motion. The item is tabled. Council Order Number 032005, request of the Public Works Director to award the purchase of a single axle plow truck and associated equipment.
Good evening, councilors. Hang on with my order here. Tonight I'm here in front of you to request to purchase a single axle plow truck from Daigle Holton to update our fleet and replace our oldest full-time use truck. Bids were opened on February 19th. We actually had a significant number of bids that were received. We did put together a spreadsheet to kind of break down and analyze costs and meeting specifications and what we're looking for in a truck. And we are requesting to purchase the truck from Daigle and Holton. It's an international HV 507 with HP Fairfield gearing. And we are requesting to go with option 2, the stainless steel dump body that will last longer and potentially be able to be used on multiple actual chassis. And to get a stainless steel oil pan that will last. We consistently replace oil pans almost yearly because of the salt and corrosiveness of the metal since it's on the underside. We are requesting for $1,550 to upgrade to a stainless steel pan that should last at least multiple years. So saving us time and money over the long run. I guess I'll open up to any questions on anything.
Councilors.
That truck fits the needs, and I think the stainless steel pan is an excellent idea. I remember at the cost of those pans is somewhere between $300 to $500 now.
They're more than that nowadays.
It's 7 now. Well,
Yep.
7. Wait a minute. Yeah, plus the labor to do it. So it's money well spent. If that truck fits specs, then it did look pretty much. I went through what you'd asked for, and I think you pretty well hit it. No great advantage in going with a Western Star that's worthy of the additional money.
We struggled with that, and for the additional $10,000, we just couldn't see.
Can't justify it.
Can't justify it.
As long as that truck does it fine, which we have several internationals now.
Councilors?
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the purchase of a 2020 International Plow Truck with plow, wing, and dump body and associated gearing supplied by HP Fairfield from Daigle and Houghton for a sum of $161,051 with funding coming from bond proceeds, including the trade-in of the 2006 International Plow Truck, and allow the city manager to sign all required documentation.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second? Any further discussion? Being none? All in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 18, Council Order Number 032007, request to amend the Conservation Easement Branch Lake Fen Trust parcels between the Frenchman Bay Conservancy, City of Ellsworth, and the State of Maine as third-party holder.
Motion to table? Request for motion to table?
I think you skipped one in between those two.
Oh,
Oh, yes, I did.
I thought I came a little sudden.
Sorry.
I checked the wrong. Thank you. We'll come back to that one. Item 17, Council Order Number 032006, request of the Public Works Director to award a bid for the Harbor Walkway Project.
So, good evening, councilors. On March 12th, 2020, a bid opening was held for the work required to place concrete and bricks at the Harbor Walkway Project. Multiple bids were solicited and 3 bids were received. The low bid was for Atlantic Landscaping Construction for a total of $53,020. Atlantic Landscape was the contractor that previously installed the brick pavers down at the harbor. So we are requesting to award the project to them.
Councilors.
Mr. Chairman, Lisa, are there lights on this project?
No.
Walkway lights?
There are not.
Is there conduit being laid for
So,
lights?
there is not. As part of this project, we have a grant from the Maine Recreational Trails Program to help fund this. The Maine Recreational Trails Program, per their requirements, they do not fund any sort of landscaping, any sort of fixtures, it's a trails program made strictly for trails. So our funding is for the trail portion only that we are getting from it's actually a federal and then passed down through the state grant program. Does that mean that those things cannot be added in at a later date or as an add-on to the project, should the city find funding themselves for it? We can always decide to add stuff if the city wants to pay for it themselves.
In a conversation I had with former Councilor Fortier about a month ago, I asked him the approximate cost of laying conduit while the project is being built on a, I forget the distance this is, and he estimated approximately $600. And of course, the best time to lay that conduit for future use is when the excavation is being done. I think the city needs to find that money and lay that conduit with the project. Also, another question I have, are there any cement bump outs being considered for picnic tables and or benches, rather than putting them on the grass where it would be very difficult to mow around them? If these are put on cement pads?
They're not at this time. We mow around picnic tables and benches in the portion of the park that we already have benches and picnic tables. So the idea would be to just strategically place additional or reset our current picnic tables.
One of my favorite things when I visit other towns, cities, areas, is to go walking. And time again, I see tables and benches for the use of families, elderlies, anyone that wants to use them. And they're all on cement pads. That way they are not walking on wet, muddy grounds. And one thing that I do notice, I don't see any weed whacker lines around the base of the benches and or the tables. When the trimming,
yeah, I'm going to have the previous
the
harbor master come up here because he has been part of this for more. But one of the things I also want to mention is part of the issue with having these concrete potential bump outs is per DEP requirements, we have to be at least 25 feet away from the high tide mark when we put our walkway in. And when you do that, and we measured it the other day when we had a really high tide, there's not a lot of extra room on the water side. We have just enough room in some of the narrower places to get our sidewalk in before we're into that 25 feet buffer.
But they could be put on the street side of the path.
They could be, but then you're into your green area. But
Some of the best parts of the harbor down there, having the picnic tables not on a designated spot, is when you come down with your large family, you can take two of those tables and put them together. If you start anchoring them where they belong, you're gonna have to find a way to mount them there.
Oh, I agree on the anchoring part.
And back to the weed whacking, that is done quite regularly. We even bought a weed whacker down there for us to use if it does get messed.
Right, my point on the weed whacking though, was it also whacks the wood, so to speak.
If you don't move the table, you're absolutely right, but if you pick that table up, you can mow it underneath of it, or you can weed whack it and then move the table, which happens a lot.
My personal opinion, I just think we're penny wise and pound foolish not to make this neat and trim and to pour these, what I call the cement bump outs, the cement pads for the benches and tables while we're pouring cement for the walkway. It would be very little dollars.
Yeah, I want to point out that the scope of the state grant only covers the basic trail itself. So if we were to do these additional items, it would need to go through the budget process. However, as I understand it from the Public Works Director, logistically it's not critical that they be done at the same time as the trail. It would not, you're not talking
No.
heavy equipment to get in there and
No.
add bump outs and that type of thing.
My-
That would call for it to have to be done when you're in the ground.
My biggest thing, and this is me trying to make this look nice as much as possible with what we're working with, is if I'm walking, based on the layout of the, looking at the layout that we went out and looked at earlier, or actually last week, the people are going to want to sit on the water side of the walkway because that's where you're going to see the water. To get on the water side of the walkway, you have to have those things on grass because we cannot put any concrete on the water side of the walkway because we will then be within the 25 feet that we are not allowed to be per our DEP permit. So I think it's a case of let us show you, and then should we want to add them later, we can add them later.
Why-
And as far as the conduit and that kind of thing, I think this bid came in decently under the estimated cost. So there may have been funds that were previously designated to this project that we might be able to use to add those conduits and some of those things in once we have a contract.
My goal in mentioning this is to make sure that we do it right the first time. Not to second guess ourselves after it's in place.
When would you expect the work to begin?
The requirement for the bid specs was that it's completed before May 15th, so that it's done before the harbor opens for the season.
Councilor Moore?
I like the idea of putting in conduit. I'm not crazy about the concrete pads for the reasons that have been offered already. But I think that there may come a time where we want some kind of lighting. And if it's convenient, then $600, I think it's worth the expense down the road. I think it was a good idea.
Councilor Phillips?
As far as the conduit goes, I would say that it probably is a good idea to a certain extent, but also laying conduit with no plan of lighting of distances or bump ups for the thing is a tad interesting anyway. But at this point, I'd say this bid is for that walkway, and the state has to have it as simple as it is. And anything over and above that's going to be a separate entity anyway, and it's going to have to be worked out with a different contract with them to add whatever additional labor they're going to need and additional product. So what we have to work on tonight is what the state wants to look at, and the federal government, and get the initial part of it moving. And if you want to add your conduit later, it's going to be a different contract and a different dollar set. And thinking about how this is designed, Adam, and if they're going to lay a 5-foot walkway, they're not going to have 8 foot dug up anyway. They're going to dig up 5'3", so there's no place for conduit anyway. So it's additional digging. So this contract then becomes moot because you're asking to do something over and above what their design would be.
It would still be cheaper to do it now. The path is 6 feet,
6 feet, correct.
and lay a 6-foot path.
It's
You're
not
gonna-
that tough for that mini excavator to go down there even after the fact. And go
Right.
down through that thing and scoop that out and lay the conduit in. The highway department can do it, Mark. It's simple stuff. That's not rocket science to doing this stuff.
To have an employee get down with the city equipment afterwards and dig a trench is going to take a couple of days to lay that, and where it can be done with the project, the way I'm looking at it now, to me, it's just a no-brainer to do it now. Conduit is cheap. It's
I know conduit is cheap. City employees are already on the clock, Mark. You're paying him whether you want him or not.
But they can also be used in other places.
Mm-hmm.
If we spend $600 now, estimated, we can save that money by having the employees in other places throughout the summer. We'll make that back inside of a day.
Councilor Kaplan, did you have your hand? It's hard to.
Hello. I'm just wondering if this is going to be patrolled I'm assuming it's going in towards the gazebo, right?
Yep, it's going from the existing large gazebo over to the smaller gazebo and then back up towards the
Parking lot.
pump station.
And so the gazebo area is patrolled now to a certain degree by the police.
As far as patrolling, first of all, we have 12 cameras. 12 cameras that we have, security cameras down there, just for all those folks that don't know that. But we do have cameras. They're 24/7 out there that monitor it, that we have access to. And I believe the PD also has access to. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that they already monitor it because we have the 2 gazebos. It's not going to change.
Are they able to see at night the second gazebo?
Yep. I haven't looked at myself, but.
So the conduit that you're talking about is purely for safety of people walking after dark?
For electricity, for lights. If Myron Park Kettle want to take a 9 p.m. stroll, they should be able to do so safely and not have it in the black of night.
How much would a street light from the water department brick house be to light the whole area?
You would need several of those.
I mean, it's something we can look into at a further date. It's something that this grant itself will not pay for. So is it something that if we want to look at later, it's definitely an option. We can get a conduit and light polling price if that's what we want to look into.
So maybe just a suggestion that since we take up this item, the work is probably going to start next month.
Sooner than later, hopefully.
And if you could maybe pull together the estimate for what Council Blanchett is talking about, that perhaps if there's a desire, maybe set up a separate meeting to discuss that particular issue and add on. Since we don't have that figure now, it would be hard to vote on that as a matter of approval. Yeah. So if we do that work between and bring it back to maybe a special meeting just for that discussion, would that work for you?
The meeting, yes, but for me to vote positive on this tonight.
No, I'm not asking you to vote. I'm just that process, if that's so that we can move on this issue and then.
Certainly.
Okay. Mr. Chair. Manager Cole.
It may also be possible through this contractor to do this as a city-funded add-on, but we would need to get into the discussion. But we first need to lock down the grant and get that going and build from that platform. Still may be possible, but we need that train to leave the station.
So, councilors, what would you like to do?
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the request of the Public Works Director to award the bid for the Harbor Walkway project with Atlantic Landscape Construction for contract price of $53,020, and to fund this project from bond proceeds and a grant reimbursement from the Maine Recreational Trails Program.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? One opposition? Motion passes.
Thank you.
And we will then, if you could gather that as quickly as possible, then we will then.
Yep, and I think it's definitely, as David said, an option to potentially have this contractor give us a price. So.
Okay. Thank you. Item 18, this will sound familiar. Council Order Number 032007, request to amend the conservation easement Branch Lake Fen Trust parcels between the Frenchman Bay Conservancy, City of Ellsworth, and the State of Maine as third-party holder.
Just a point, Aaron Doherty of the Frenchman Bay Conservancy isn't here tonight, and I think this can wait another month. Yes, Councilor?
Is there any reason we need to, it's a pretty cut and dry thing.
Not in my mind, no. If I'm ready to roll with this if you are. And yeah.
Councilor?
Move to authorize the city manager to sign the amendment to the existing conservation easement on the Fenn property adjacent to the water treatment facility in order to complete the backwash handling system upgrade as required by the DEP EPA compliance standards.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous?
Great.
Item 19, public hearing and action on proposed amendments to the City of Ellsworth Code of Ordinance, Chapter 3, Harbor Ordinance.
I would like to request to table, but I mean, I can knock it out real quick if you want me to. So the harbor chair is not here. They are requesting to make a change to the ordinance to prevent houseboats from berthing at the harbor for the operations of any Airbnb and other rental lodging. They feel that this type of lodging would create noise, water and traffic issues with the harbor, and they believe it's not designed to effectively deal with this type of lodging. So they would like to have the amendments that I prepared for you in your packets. And we did have assistance from the city attorney with the wording.
So just weigh in for consideration. I think something like that, given that the public really couldn't be here tonight, given our circumstances, we have time before the harbor opens. That it would be nice to be able to afford the opportunity, should somebody have an opinion on this, and be able to present it.
And I have several questions on it also.
Okay, yeah, and I'm...
Move to table.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Item is tabled. Item 20, public hearing and action on council order number 032008, order authorizing the issuance of up to $368,030 of the city's general obligation bonds to finance upgrades to the city's State Street and High Street water tanks.
Thank you. So back in 2016, the Maine Drinking Water SRO program had approved funding for upgrades to the State Street and High Street water tank project. The SRF program issues to municipalities low-interest loans at about 1%. At that time, the project was estimated at about $685,000. The project would include cleaning of the storage tanks and painting. As part of the project also, the interior of the High Street tank had to be sandblasted to remove any corrosion. When they were in there sandblasting, we realized there was some extensive damage that needed some significant repairs. Back in July of 2019, we had an emergency council meeting, and we had to authorize a change order in the amount of $151,000. I also explained at that July meeting that the estimate for the actual project was higher than expected, as well as I would need to come back to you to get approval for the unexpected change order. So that is taking into account for all of the funding needed for the entire project. The project has been finished. This is the final piece that we need to submit to the PUC for final approval for us to get our money back from the Maine Bond Bank for this project. So the total amount of the project was $1,053,030, and as part of that, we received $50,151.50 in principal forgiveness. So this is a public hearing, so Heidi is out there monitoring anybody that is interested, and we can call them if they would like to, if they have any questions as well.
So I'm going to slowly open the public hearing to see if any questions come in. So public hearing is open. Wait for Heidi.
I'm monitoring the emails as well coming through, so if we could just give it maybe a couple of minutes.
Nothing. Public hearing is closed. Councilors?
Mr. Chairman, move to authorize the issuance of up to $368,030 of City of Ellsworth general obligation bonds to finance upgrades to the State Street and High Street water tanks.
Second.
Motion and second.
I think, Councilor Kaplan, you had a question? Sorry.
You had said that it was a 1% loan, but currently we're rates are dropped? Is there-
Those are set by the SRF program, though, so.
It's not related?
No.
I was like, geez, if
I
I can
know.
get the 0%,
yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't trickle down that way. What the Fed pays.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Item 21, public hearing and action on proposed amendments and additions to Chapter 56 Unified Development Ordinance, Article 3 Zoning Districts, Article 14 Definitions, and Article 8 Performance Standards. The proposed amendments will create additional categories and allowable uses in Article 3, Section 307, Table of Land Uses, create additional entries in Article 14 Definitions, and will add the following sections to Article and Performance Standards. Section 823, Solar Energy Systems. Section 824, Energy Storage Systems. Section 825, Facility Operations, Maintenance, Decommissioning, and Abandonment. Councilors, I would also, similar to my previous statement for this item, given that we did put this out, invitation for the public, and I know that there's an interest that we hold this off for a future meeting.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair of the Planning Board, John DeLeo, is here, and apparently he would like to say something.
I mean, I understood it was going to be tabled, but I'd like to just pass along some information that specifically deals with this solar issue. Right now, I mean, you had 3 pages of additions to the ordinance, and there's a kind of an updated spreadsheet. Other than those documents, there's nothing in our current regulations that cover solar farms whatsoever. And we're scheduled to have a planning board meeting on April 1st. Now, whether that occurs or not, who knows at this point. But there is an application before the city that was going to come to that planning board meeting for a solar farm. Now, I mean, I briefly had a chance to talk to Mr. Cole about this. If that comes before the planning board with nothing on our ordinances to cover solar farms, do we hear the presentation? Do we have jurisdiction over it? I mean, I think we could handle it without these specific additions, but it would be a lot more helpful to make sure that we get it right with the additions. So I just wonder if it's prudent at the same time that you're tabling it to perhaps get an opinion from the city lawyer as to how we go about this. I mean,
If we table it.
Well, even now, even if you voted on it now, I'm not sure where that application is already in the pipeline. They've already submitted the application. Will we be able to discuss it with the new ordinance? I don't think we could.
We can't. I'm pretty sure we've run into this before in the past, and it's already started, and this is yeah, it's too late for the one that you've got, but would affect all earlier ones, and I'm working on an old memory, but we ran into this on a couple of other things in the past, John, you may remember, that once it was started and initiated, that you had to use present rules that were at the time application was started.
I mean, I believe you're right.
So this is
I mean, I've communicated a little with a lady who was on the Trenton Planning Board, and actually yesterday, briefly in an email, she said, I spoke with an MMA lawyer during my training last month, and she informed me if there is not a town or city ordinance to cover the presented application, that we are to deny the application, as our board would not have jurisdiction. I certainly don't know if that's the same situation that they're dealing with, we're dealing with. But if that is the case, perhaps we should find out, deny the application, and say, they'll be back. I mean, if we deny the application, and say, resubmit it after the council has a chance, hopefully passes.
Manager Cole.
Yes, I have texts from Development Director Jana Richards, and hold on just a second here. In our new age of Well, she's saying that we are going to work with the developer applicant given the circumstances, and, hi Janet. Okay, and that we're going to try to get them to delay their application so the applicant can request to be heard at a later meeting. That's, she's working with the applicant on that.
Okay. Councilor Kaplan?
On Facebook, they said for public discussion, can we keep it open a little bit longer because there's a lag?
Yes, if we could. Yeah. So given what you've said, I mean, the application that you have and what Jen is saying, it's going to be, most likely, if you have your meeting, it will be denied, and if you don't have your meeting, it will be delayed and then denied. I still feel that this is a significant issue that we should have public input on, and not pass it when we don't have the opportunity for the community to weigh in on it. So that's my opinion. If we want to do something
I
different.
certainly understand that, Mr. Chairman. I just, with the new information that Jen is working, with the developer, I just wanted to make sure you all were
Oh, no,
aware
and
of
absolutely, I appreciate
this
you.
issue.
No, I appreciate you bringing that forward.
And that's a catch-22 situation. I agree with you, Chairman, that I think at this point it would probably be, there's no advantage for us to pass it now without allowing the public some input. Just what's in the pipeline's in the pipeline, and they are held to current ordinances, which are pretty minimal of that. So, that being said, move to table.
You have a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor to table? Unanimous. Motion's table. All right, item's table. Motion is not.
Thanks, John.
And item 22, Council Order Number 032009, request to approve a resolution by the Ellsworth City Council expressing opposition to LD 2090, an act to amend the laws governing arbitration under certain public employees' labor relations laws. This is a resolution in light of that the legislature is adjourning tomorrow, probably will not move forward.
Right.
At least in this session.
Right.
But in the letter and thought process, I totally agree with you. Would you like a motion? Do you want to read it?
Whatever is your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, I approve the language of the what do you want to call it?
Resolution.
Resolution concerning LD 90, and I would authorize you to sign for the members of the council.
Second.
Motion, a second. Further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Item 23, adjournment.
Move we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, councilors.